Okay, guys, we gotta talk about it.
In the interests of transparency, I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I'm not expecting to agree with his video. Is it self-fulfilling prophecy, or do I have some legitimate critiques? Let's find out on this episode of Bridgeview Drive Presents.
Plot holes used to be this thing that only existed in super nerdy movie conversations. Like, hey, how did Indiana Jones survive clinging to the outside of that submarine? But over the past 15 years, they've become pervasive, spreading through online movie conversations. Everywhere you turn, people are complaining about
biggest plot holes.
Plot holes. Plot holes. All the plot holes.
Plot holes. So full of plot holes. Plot holes.
Naruto plot holes.
So many plot holes.
Plot holes and maybe plot holes.
Back in April, when A Quiet Place opened, my Twitter and Facebook feeds were filled with people complaining about all the plot holes. I saw one guy say he'd made a list of 41 plot holes in that movie. But here's the thing. No one seems to actually know what a plot hole is. And all those plot holes people complain about, they don't actually matter. So, what is a plot hole? People's definitions vary, but here's the generally accepted one that I use. A plot hole is a point in which a story breaks a previously established rule about its own universe. Basically, it's when a story contradicts itself.
Yeah, I accept your definition.
Okay, so here's what are not plot holes.
In The Dark Knight Rises, we never see how Batman gets back to Gotham City. That's a plot hole.
One of the earliest cinematic developments was the concept of montage. The idea is that when two images are presented in sequence, the audience understands that they occur chronologically and will mentally fill in the time between scenes. So for instance, if a person is in one location and the next scene they're in another location, we understand that in between scenes they traveled between the locations. Movies tend to assume that the audience is reasonably intelligent. But I guess they're wrong. If movies showed us every single second that happened during the span of the story, they would be 40 hours long and really f***ing boring.
I don't think it's so much about what happens off camera, it's just how does an injured, malnourished man get halfway across the world to the heaviest guarded city in the country with no money or connections?
There are so many plot holes in A Quiet Place. Oh, it's such a great movie. I mean, like, why did they decide to have a baby? And why didn't they just move to the waterfall?
Oh, this is the one that really drives me nuts. Movies are, for the most part, about human beings, or at least characters who think and act like human beings. And you know what human beings are not? Logical. People are impulsive. They make choices based on emotion. Not everyone thinks exactly the same. And also, people make mistakes. You know how in Star Trek, Vulcans live dominated by logic, and it's established that acting logically is at odds with acting human. So if everyone acted totally logically all the time, only making the most logical decision in any situation, no one would be acting human. Thus, there would be no conflict, which would lead to no drama, which would lead to no stories. And movies would be really f***ing boring.
So this is where you start to lose me a little. Yes, humans are illogical, but once you lay down the rules of a character, you need to follow those rules, otherwise it breaks immersion. For instance, in the Avengers Infinity War, Star-Lord gets hot-headed and attacks Thanos, inadvertently keeping the others from taking the gauntlet off Thanos. Yes, this was a senseless thing to do, but it was not uncharacteristic. Star-Lord has done this before in Guardians 2 with Ego, so this is not a plot hole, unlike David in Prometheus, who constantly contradicts his own actions without any discernible motivation. Sometimes he gets his own crewmates killed on purpose, and sometimes he saves their lives.
There is a huge plot hole in Star Wars. I mean, come on. Why would the Death Star have such an obvious design flaw?
Okay, some of these can be valid complaints. Sometimes there's a story development that's a little too convenient. Like in the 2009 Star Trek, Kirk just happens to get stranded on the same planet as old Spock, and they end up in the same cave together so Spock can explain what's going on. I like the movie, but that's a little contrived and lazy. But it's not a plot hole.
I concede this point. Lazy writing that makes something too convenient can break immersion and pull me out of the movie. But you are right. It is not a plot hole. Maybe we'll come back to this later.
I mean, how does Benicio del Toro know the rebels' plans? Nobody told him. That's a plot hole.
At least 50% of the plot holes that I see people complain about are things that are actually explained in the movie if you just pay attention. Like that one in The Last Jedi, there's a scene where you see DJ listening as Poe tells Finn and Rose the Resistance's plan. But I guess if you're too busy live tweeting about plot holes, you can miss some stuff.
No argument from me, but I do think it absolutely is a plot hole if it is not shown how a character gets information to move the story forward. But I don't think this is what you're saying, so we'll just move on.
If you want, you can find plot holes anywhere. They're all over your favorite movies. In Lord of the Rings, the Eagles could have just flown the ring to Mount Doom and saved everyone all that trouble.
This is explained in the books. However, I am a firm believer that a movie should be viewed without needing extra reading material. And since it is not revealed in the movie, it is a plot hole.
In Toy Story, why does Buzz freeze like the other toys when he thinks he's a real person?
I don't think this one's a plot hole since it follows the rules of the universe. Buzz may not think he is a toy, but he is a toy, so he follows the rules all other toys follow, whether he's aware of it or not. Maybe it's a comatose-like state when humans are around, or maybe it's the freeze reaction in opposition to fight or flight. But as long as it follows the rules of the universe, it's not a plot hole.
In Ocean's 11, how did they get the flyers into the vault?
I have a point to make about this later. We'll get back to it.
In Cinderella, why does the glass slipper stay when everything else disappears? In Alien, if the acid can melt through the floor, why doesn't it melt through the entire ship?
When acid melts a substance, it then mixes with that substance after it is liquefied, thus losing potency over time. Science.
In Gremlins, what does after midnight technically mean? Isn't it always after midnight? How does that rule make any sense?
No, I don't think this one's really a plot hole. I think it's just a case of bad narrator. They just didn't really explicitly outline the rules. Yes, we don't know when it ends, but nobody ever actually breaks the rule.
In Star Wars, why does the Death Star have a trash compactor when they can just jettison the trash into space?
Maybe the Empire has a recycling program. We never see it jettison into space. It just compaction makes it easier to ship.
Look, if you want to watch stuff this way, you can even find plot holes in this video. Why am I wearing sunglasses if I'm inside? I'm indoors in one shot and outdoors in the next, but we never see me go outside. Plot hole.
While jumping around locations in the middle of dialogue while switching glasses violates narrative structure, it does not violate the structure of a video essay. What does violate the structure of a video essay, however, is a lack of consistency of format, which is where your video fails. You move from point to point without a clear thesis and conclusion.
You can find plot holes or logic gaps in any movie, and if you want to, go right ahead. Just don't tell me that those are genuine flaws and problems and reasons that a movie is bad, because they're not. None of these things actually matter, because they're not what a movie is about.
I've never had anything of mine published except for one thing on Kindle that no one ever bought, but I still like to consider myself a writer. I've had pages upon pages of scribbles thrown away over the years. I've forgotten more story ideas than books I've read. So it just confounds me for someone to tell me that plot doesn't matter, that it's not something that's important in a film. And don't tell me I'm conflating this, because what is plot without consistency? If part of the plot is flawed, then the plot is flawed. The Perfect Getaway is about two characters on vacation in fear of a couple of murderers that may be stalking them. In the end, the twist is that the main characters are the murderers. So why is it that they talk among themselves all alone about how they are scared and who they think the murderers are? I personally think this ruined the movie, and it was just too big of a plot hole to get around.
So even though most people are using the term plot hole incorrectly, all of these complaints are rooted in the same thing. But movies aren't about logic.
No, movies aren't about logic, but that doesn't mean we can't apply logic to them. Yes, the characters in the movie may act irrationally or illogical, but the movie itself set up rules of its universe that should be followed.
They're not equations, they're not proofs, they're not puzzles. Movies are not math. Remember that guy in your freshman dorm who would always try to guess the endings of movies so that he could prove that he was smarter than the people who made them? Well, now everyone is turning into that guy. On the site movieplotholes.com, there are 7 plot holes listed for Die Hard. The first one says that the villain's plan is to stage a hostage situation so that the police will shut down power to the building, allowing them to access the vault. But since they would have already had detailed plans of the building, they could have just shut down power themselves, making the whole thing more simple. Now, I know it seems impossible to watch movies wrong, but you're watching movies wrong.
Gatekeeping much? So this is where you completely lose me. Sounds like you're trying to take something subjective and make it objective. Film is art, and art is subjective. Everyone enjoys movies that are in their own way. So when you say something like, you're watching movies wrong, you're invalidating someone else's experience. I'm starting to wonder if you think critics go into movies thinking, how am I going to rip this movie apart? What are all of its flaws? And I'm sure someone out there does it. I just don't think that's how it works most of the time. Cards on the table, I'm not expecting to agree with his video. Okay. We do it all the time. Whether we disagree with the premise right off the bat or we don't have much faith in the director, sometimes we set ourselves up for failure when we just think it's bad or something's wrong with it before we even view it. Let me give you a quick anecdote. Recently, I saw a video in my recommended videos on YouTube. It was called something along the lines of why the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies were bad. And I was thinking to myself, well, fuck you. The first 2 were fine. They were great. It was the Amazing Spider-Man movies that sucked. And then it came up over and over and over again. And finally I said, fuck it, I'll watch the damn video. And you know what? He kind of changed my mind on a few things. I still love those movies, and honestly, he does too. But you should check out the video. It's in the description. I'll give you another anecdote, and then I'll wrap up this point. So it's really difficult to get me to watch movies that I'm not really interested in, and this is something that drives my family insane. And so every once in a while they say, okay, Jared, we've watched enough of what you want to watch today, can we please watch this? And you know what? 8 out of 10 times I end up really enjoying the movie. My point is, even if we go into something thinking we're not going to like it or we're going to disagree with it, I think as long as we go into it with an open mind and a willingness to change our mind, I think we can do pretty good. With that being said, I honestly think most critics go into movies hoping at least to enjoy it, only to have the flaws ruin their experience.
Die Hard is a movie about an ordinary man thrown into an impossible situation, who needs to rise to the occasion and persevere so that he can reunite with his estranged wife. That's the point of the movie. That's what it's about. Most of the other plot holes for Die Hard listed on the site are variations on, why didn't John McClane do this? Well, because the whole point of John McClane is that he's a normal guy who makes human mistakes. If he did the perfect, most logical thing every single time, he wouldn't be the same character. He'd basically be a Vulcan, and the movie would end way earlier and be terrible. Take Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. At the climax of the story, Harry reaches the Triwizard Cup, which turns out to have been turned into a portkey that transports him to Voldemort. So the villain's whole plan hinged on Harry being the one to get to the cup first and win the tournament. But really, any random object could have been turned into a portkey, and they could have sent him to Voldemort way earlier without all that hassle. But that doesn't matter. We're so invested in Harry trying to figure out a way to win, and then so surprised by the reveal of the portkey and Voldemort returning, that to pick apart the logic of the villain's plan would mean totally disengaging from the story.
I'm not sure if you're saying this is a plot hole or not, because it falls under your own definition of plot contrivance. It's also a case of a character, Voldemort, not acting logical. It may be contrived and lazy,
but it's not a plot hole. This, like so many plot holes, are things that would just destroy any conflict or drama and end the story immediately. Like, sure, to an objective, omniscient viewer, it would make logical sense for Admiral Holdo to tell Poe Dameron her plan. And then there would be no conflict and no drama. Poe would never send Finn on a mission, and Finn would never grow, and Poe would never grow, and there would be no story. And also, Holdo explains why she doesn't tell him the plan, she doesn't trust him, he just f***ed up and got demoted, she has no reason to. Again, if you think this is a plot hole, or you're annoyed because of the logic here, you're kinda watching movies wrong.
There's that elitist line again, and once more, as a writer, I have a problem with this line of thinking. Yes, if certain badly written events don't happen, then the plot can't move forward, but my answer to that is then just rewrite the events. When certain people make out-of-character decisions, or something confusing happens, I can see the wheels turning in the writer's head, and they're thinking, how do I get from point A to point B? This breaks immersion and pulls me out of the movie. I think a pretty good synonym for plot hole would be inconsistency, which is something that I tend to have a problem with. There's a practice in Hollywood called continuity. Here's an example. Let's say you're watching a movie, and during a shot reverse shot dialogue scene, one of the characters is suddenly dressed drastically different, or even has an actor change completely. Wouldn't this be jarring? Wouldn't it pull you out of the movie and break immersion completely? See, that's how it is for a lot of people when it comes to plot holes. It's inconsistent, so it pulls you out of the movie and breaks immersion. In my opinion, plot holes are the result of bad or lazy writing.
There's an episode of the show Community that imagines what a horror movie would look like if all the characters only made totally logical decisions.
Should we go check it out?
No. We should call 911 on my fully charged cell phone, lock the doors, and then stand back to back in the middle of the room holding knives.
And the conclusion is that it would be really boring.
To be honest, most horror movies that follow this type of formula are usually considered to be bad but have a cult following.
I'm in no way telling you to turn your brain off or to not think critically about movies. Not at all. I'm saying you should worry about the things that actually matter. So, take Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. I think it's a bad movie, and it has big old dumb logic issues, like why can Superman locate Lois Lane from her heartbeat but can't find his mother the same way? Why doesn't Wonder Woman, who isn't affected by kryptonite, be the one to use the spear against Doomsday? But those aren't the real problems with the movie. The actual problems are that many of the central characters are totally static and poorly motivated, and they don't learn anything or grow through the story, and the one major moment of growth is caused by a ridiculous plot contrivance. So as much as I enjoy making fun of some dumb logic gaps in that movie, they still don't really matter.
Everything you just said is subjective. Everything that matters to you can be considered by other people to be irrelevant. Again, I think you're just gatekeeping.
The plot holes. Remember the plot holes? So you're trying to tell me the supremacy, Snoke's ship, isn't powerful enough to penetrate the shields?
In episode 2F09, when Ichi plays Scratchy's skeleton like a xylophone, he strikes the same rib twice in succession, yet he produces two clearly different tones.
Why is it that in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s, no one really cared about plot holes? They still existed, but no one ever complained a movie was bad because of all the plot holes. So what happened? Basically, the internet. Because I like driving myself insane, I searched back through Google year by year for references to plot holes. Until about 2007, they only appeared in movie reviews and forum posts. They hadn't gone fully mainstream yet. They hadn't been embraced by the public. But then in 2008, Cracked published the article 8 Classic Movies That Got Away with Gaping Plot Holes. There were more forum posts. Then in 2009, the TV Tropes page for Plot Hole was created. In 2010, it really began. Articles on Wired, The Escapist, Den of Geek, and Kotaku. Plot holes had officially crossed over into mainstream nerd culture. Their rise coincided with the arrival of listicle articles, and plot holes were the perfect clickbait. Nitpicks about popular things that could reveal things readers may have missed. But 2012 was where the change really happened. This was when plot holes started taking over YouTube. Pop culture commentary from a nerdy fan perspective began exploding in popularity.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this. Yep.
And immediately, the types of videos that proved most popular were humorous analyses of popular movies focusing on surface-level nitpicks. And over the next several years, these types of videos grew in number and popularity. For many people, especially millennials and whatever the generation after millennials is called,
Generation Z.
most film criticism they consume is on YouTube. And not all, but a lot of this is surface-level critique, focusing on nitpicks, and chief among those nitpicks, plot holes. Plot holes don't really mean anything, but they're good clickbait, and those videos get views, and they multiply. And people watch them and believe them and repeat those points in conversation. And when they watch movies, they think about these surface-level nitpicks. They look for them. No one is really to blame for this. Okay, CinemaSins definitely deserves some of the blame. But it's not just them. This is way bigger. This is about cultural shifts coinciding with evolving technology. And look, as long as movies are popular and people on the internet are making videos for clicks, it's going to keep happening. So look, watch whatever YouTube videos you want, think whatever you want about movies, just please.
Okay, if your point is the current culture of pointing out nitpicks is getting really annoying, I can't argue with that. I agree. Also, as you pointed out, I think you could look past plot holes and enjoy the rest of the movie. However, I think that could be said about almost any other aspect of filmmaking. Yes, I think plot holes can be covered up or overshadowed by other aspects of the movie as long as they are good enough. This is what I wanted to get to when talking about the Ocean's movies. I personally think they are very flawed, but I still enjoyed them immensely due to the fantastic acting, the fun characters, and the silly plot. I think bad acting can be overshadowed by amazing cinematography. I think flat characters can be overshadowed by brilliant storytelling. And I think that plot holes can be overshadowed by fantastic acting and character. I think all aspects of filmmaking are important, including plot. And I think some aspects can be overshadowed by other aspects. But I don't think that means we can't strive to make the best movies or write the best stories. And it's the critic's job to point out the flaws and what made the movie less enjoyable for them. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.
You don't drink tea.